Hello, I'm Christopher Lee. Welcome to Ghosts.
I can't say that every single ghost that's ever happened can be explained away. That's impossible. All I can do is to provide alternative explanations for why people see things. And from psychology we know a lot about the way people imagine things and the way they have hallucinations. Now you may think you have to be mad to have hallucinations, but you don't at all. We often, you walk into a room and you see something and oh, there's my cat. Oh, no, it's not. It was just a black shadow on the floor. Now that sort of thing happens to everybody, and at its most extreme you can think you've seen a ghost. And there are many other psychological processes involved as well, things like just before you fall asleep you may get hypnagogic imagery, which can be very, very powerful, or just when you're waking up, hypnopompic imagery, which can seem absolutely realistic. Now all of these things and many more may account for most ghosts. Whether they will account for all, I don't know. It could just be that some really convincing watertight case will turn up that I'll have to say, no way can that be accounted for by one person's mind. But I've never come across a case like that yet.
Yes, I had several. I had a very interesting one quite a number of years ago down in Sheerness. A chap who got a poltergeist, he said. His wife rang up, very sensible woman, more sensible than him. But she wanted it investigated and so did he. This thing was slashing him, cutting him all over. And things were being thrown around, and he was being thrown around. And I went down there, and this, I didn't believe it over the phone. This chap had got something in the order of 200 cuts rather like Stanley knife cuts. And to cut a long story short, that's what it was. He was cutting himself for attention. Now, you told me about equipment earlier on. I've got a video camera there. And of course you sit in the corner, and it records visually and it records sound. And you can see what's going on. This chap was in the chair, and he was saying that he gets pushed. And suddenly he pushed himself back. And the wife and I, his wife and I, had to go up and pull him up. He was saying, get up, get up, get up. Well, we couldn't see anything. And he was pushing himself off. And to cut a long story short, what this man was doing, with a video you could see all this because he could work it all out. He'd go out somewhere to the laboratory or the kitchen, and he'd come back, and 2 minutes later he'd say, oh, like that. So what's wrong? It's cutting me. He was soon to take his trousers off, and there's 2 cuts, bleeding cuts. Or was open his shirt, and there's 2 bleeding cuts. Now what he'd done, he'd gone outside and slashed himself, waited 2 minutes, and then went through this. Interesting, but a complete nonsense.
After cashing up on an evening shift, I put the float in its tray in the filing cabinet, locked the filing cabinet and left the restaurant. Coming back the following morning, went to take the cash tray out of the filing cabinet, and the money had been removed from the filing cabinet and placed in little piles underneath the tray. A couple of other incidences that have happened in the restaurant, not directly affecting me, were we had builders in the restaurant earlier in the year, and they let themselves in the back door, and the posts that arrived that morning had been neatly stacked halfway up the stairs. As the post arrives at 7 in the morning and the night shift finishes at 1 o'clock in the morning, there's no explanation why that happened. Also with the builders, they had an Alsatian dog which used to accompany them when they were doing their work, and they were doing some work in the bar upstairs in the restaurant, and the dog refused. The dog was taken up to the restaurant, up to the bar, and it refused to stay in there. It whimpered a lot and ran down the stairs and would not go anywhere near the bar.
Have you checked your reflection recently? Have you checked your reflection recently?
most ghosts look absolutely normal. You can't distinguish them from ordinary people very often. They may be transparent. It came about because some ghosts are seen as just luminous blobs, and sometimes maybe you would see a couple of holes. There's a famous photograph of a ghost that has a couple of, sort of eye holes in a sheet and that. So there's a little bit of evidence that sometimes they might indeed appear like that. But I can tell you that most ghosts are indistinguishable from people, and indeed, unless your attention is drawn to the fact, you often don't realize that you've seen a ghost.
Well, the popular image of a ghost is that it's something sort of whitish or greyish, transparent, with no feet. It sort of hovers along without touching the floor, and often hooded or veiled in some way. And I think this is what you'd expect if ghosts are coming from people's own minds and yet are sort of mentally projected out into the real world. There's a clash between seeing what's there and mixing it up with your own visual image. So that I think this is exactly what you'd expect, this kind of transparency. The feet are tricky because you've actually got to connect them to the floor, so it's easier if your brain's constructing a mental image to leave out the feet and have it sort of float along. And of course, if you haven't got much information, it's just a vague shape, it will look kind of hooded and monk-like, hence the grey ladies and the monks and so on of the traditional ghost. I think it just reflects the fact that they're mental images.
If the clock is wound well but still stops, count it as a bad omen. If the clock is wound well but still stops, count it as a bad omen.